Okay, Madigan. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, can you see the chat if I pull it up? Hold on, let me see. Can you see the chat here?
Nope.
Okay. And Liverpool, if you guys want to mute your mic for the first piece of this presentation.
I can do that for them.
Okay, perfect.
She said it.
And you'll, okay.
Hi, attendees. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to hang tight for a couple minutes while we wait for everyone to join. So please be patient and we'll get started soon. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'd like to welcome all of you who've Zoomed in from across the country or maybe even from outside of the United States, and to those future listeners who may be tuning in to our recording. I'm really excited to be here with you again today to share Amplify's core literacy curriculum for kindergarten through 5th grade that puts the science of reading into action. I'm also thrilled that we have guests joining us from Liverpool Central School District in New York who've embraced this shift from using balanced literacy for years to now using CKLA, which is the only program that is developed from reading science. So we get to hear from them as they share their personal journey with you all, and it's truly an inspiring story. I'm really excited. Before we get started, just to go over a few some housekeeping information. This webinar is being recorded. If for some reason you do experience technical difficulties, please let us know in the questions panel. And you can also try to troubleshoot that by restarting your Zoom application. At the end of this webinar, we're going to open up the floor for questions from either our guest or for me to hopefully provide you some answers too. So now that we've went over our housekeeping information, happy Wednesday. I'm going to share a little bit about myself with you all. My name is Meagan Molbert, and I'm a former elementary teacher from South Louisiana. The majority of my time in the classroom was spent with kindergarten through 2nd grade students. And those are really those foundational years that are extremely impactful on students' reading success in their later years. It was actually through my experience in the classroom that I came to learn about the science of reading. And that also gave me the opportunity to work with educators from different parts of the country who, like myself, were putting the science of reading into action through utilizing Amplify's core literacy curriculum. So I actually really love my job now as a curriculum specialist because it allows me to continue learning about current reading science, and it also gives me the opportunity to share my passion for effective literacy instruction with educators across the nation, and also you here today. So now that I've introduced myself, I want to know who's joining us. I want to know more about you. So let's participate in a poll to find out who's here. Are you a district leader? Are you a classroom teacher? A curriculum director? Maybe you're a parent. Let's see, we'll give you a few more seconds to click on what you are or who you are. Oh, it looks like our poll results are in. We have a lot of coaches here today, classroom teachers. Really, we're represented. It looks like each field is representative. So welcome and thanks for joining again. Let's begin our webinar journey by reviewing the science of reading principles. In Susan Lambert's first webinar of this series, she really focused on these core beliefs that are at the center of science-based literacy instruction. These 7 principles are really the core research-based findings that identify how the brain learns to read. They take that, the simple view of reading, the understanding that it takes both decoding and language comprehension to develop a proficient reader. They put this together, put that simple view formula together. And in order to determine if your current literacy curriculum and assessment is aligned to the science of reading, you can look at these principles and determine if these beliefs are reflective in your daily implementation of your current curriculum in your classroom or in your schools or district. Last week, Karen and I intensely focused on what effective science-based instruction should entail. We reviewed ILA's leadership brief that identified the 7 key characteristics of explicit systematic phonics instruction. After breaking down each characteristic, we developed this checklist to determine if your current phonics curriculum includes each of these. So those key characteristics that were identifiers of what a true explicit systematic phonics instruction, one of the first things that we looked at was that it needs to include a systematic scope and sequence that, lays the framework for your phonics instruction and really introduces skills in a systematic manner, those going from more simple skills to more complex skills. Your curriculum, if you're using explicit systematic phonics instruction, you'd want to include readiness skills, and those skills include opportunities to develop phonological awareness and also provide opportunities for oral blending and segmenting, those skills that underlie in parallel reading and writing and are often needed for some students as they progress into 3rd grade. Your should include opportunities for students working with, maybe that might be starting out as oral blending, using different multimodality cueings, different multi-sensory approaches for that, and also word awareness activities. Those word awareness activities allow students to practice manipulating individual phonemes, whether that be through adding, deleting, or substituting phonemes, which is really the most complex phonemic awareness skill. Then it would, your curriculum should progress towards dictation, where students are actually writing the sounds in words that you're focusing on or explicitly teaching. It should also have instruction for high frequency words. But one thing that the article mentioned that we made note of is that you have to make sure you're measuring students' mastery of those high frequency words. And then that last key characteristic stated, that core instruction is truly, if your core instruction is truly based off of the science of reading, it's going to provide connected text for students to apply those newly learned foundational skills that you've just explicitly taught to build fluency. The second component to, using a curriculum that is truly science of reading based is that your curriculum should spend just as much time in developing background knowledge. So a knowledge-rich curriculum is going to include, is going to really build knowledge about the world through including a variety of rich topics. But those topics should be building knowledge and vocabulary both within and across grade levels. We want to continue to deepen that knowledge and vocabulary. And obviously that vocabulary development should be connected to the content in which you're reading about. And then your instruction should support comprehension during and after the reading, or after those rich texts are read. So, I just went through those key components of both a knowledge-rich curriculum and a curriculum that's going to use explicit systematic phonics instruction. But I'm excited to share Amplify CKLA with you guys, because CKLA is a program that not only meets those identifiers, but it makes putting the science of reading into action during core instruction achievable for teachers. So I'm a former CKLA teacher, so to share this with you and to have this opportunity is something that I'm thrilled to do. It was through working as a professional learning specialist and leading professional development for CKLA across the nation that I quickly became aware of some commonalities, some reasons that districts and schools were choosing to implement CKLA. A lot of those reasons, or the most common reasons I came to understand, were, these districts were having an aha moment around reading instruction. Their data was showing that they needed to make a change. It wasn't, they wanted to ensure that all students were making progress towards becoming proficient readers. Maybe their data was showing them that they really were missing a strong foundational skills program that took a daily explicit systematic approach to teaching phonics. Some of these districts came to really understand the importance of having students having background knowledge, and that being an essential piece to becoming a proficient reader. And then also one thing that, really resonated with every district I've ever worked with is that they see the need for ensuring equitable literacy instruction in their classrooms. And so they began searching for a program that empowers teachers to understand and really implement this reading science. And so that's how they came to know about CKLA. And Amplify CKLA is the only program that's program structured was actually developed from the reading science. And what I mean by that is if we look at Scarborough's rope, this perfect visual to help us understand the ingredients of both language comprehension and word recognition, we see that the rope starts off by separating language comprehension and word recognition. And CKLA's kindergarten through second grade curriculum takes a two-strand approach because of this. The foundational skills strand uses a research-based, proven approach to explicitly teaching phonological awareness and phonics so that students can really become skilled decoders as they begin to crack the code, ultimately leading them to becoming fluent readers. So in our foundational skills strand for kindergarten through second grade, like I said, we use an explicit, systematic, research-based approach to teaching phonics. We connect the sounds that students are learning about in their reading through the use of connected text, and then students also go through the foundational writing process in this strand. They develop grammar skills, spelling, they really build vocabulary here, and then handwriting instruction is also included in this strand. So just to give you a little background about what I mean about how CKLA takes an explicit systematic approach to teaching phonological awareness and phonics, our kindergarten program, well, first let me say this, CKLA is not your typical letter of the day instruction. Students don't enter kindergarten and immediately start, identifying letters, identifying those sounds, learning how to write them, and then connecting them to words that have those sounds. We actually start off at the very basics, you know, and develop those prerequisite skills, that being phonological awareness. Students receive explicit instruction and opportunities to practice syllabication, and also identifying onsets of words and rhyming. And as they develop those skills, instruction moves to the more complex skill. Remember, it's systematic, moving from more simple to more complex. We move to that more complex phonological awareness skill known as phonemic awareness, where students begin to isolate and blend individual phonemes. And then as they develop a solid phonological awareness foundation, then we begin to connect it to those sounds to print. So we see that in the basic code, what we mean by that are those are the most simple sound spellings. These are introduced or explicitly taught, not just introduced, but these are explicitly taught and practiced and mastered in kindergarten. And we continue to review that initially in first grade. And then as students progress through first and second grade, we explicitly teach the advanced pieces of code. So all 44 sounds in the English language are explicit. All of the sound spellings that represent our 44 sounds in the English language are explicitly taught through the course of K2. We leave nothing to chance. We want to send students on to third grade reading on level and having the skills needed to really decode words automatically. So I just said that we explicitly teach all of the sound spellings for the 44 sounds in our English language, which is going to lead us into this poll question. I love poll questions. So just a little pop quiz. How many sound spellings are there in the English language that represent those 44 sounds? So I'll give you guys a second to do that, to answer this question. You may know, you may not know. But I think that this is always something that I share with educators of kindergarten, first and second grade classrooms, and they're kind of shocked. This is surprising to them. So we'll give you a few more seconds to see what we get back. How many sound spellings represent the 44 sounds of the English language? All right, and the results are in. 43% of our attendees actually got this correct. There are 150 sound spellings that represent the 44 sounds in our English language. And why is it important to know that? Well, it goes back to the importance of having a system that's going to explicitly teach all of those 150 sound spellings so students can become skilled decoders. How do we do this? We built out word recognition, easy to follow routines. We take a sound first approach in CKLA. So students are receiving that explicit instruction. Instead of saying boys and girls, today we're going to learn about, you know, O and O making the oo sound. It sounds something like this. Boys and girls, today we're going to learn about the oo sound. They're going to hear it in different parts of the word, you know, demonstrate that they are hearing that. So really building on that phonemic awareness. That's all done orally. They're going to identify if it's a vowel or a consonant sound and really focus on how to do that by understanding the articulation of that sound. Once students hear that sound and are introduced to that sound, we're going to, as the teacher, you connect it to print. You introduce how to spell the sound. Students learn and practice how to write each sound. And then they apply that sound, this newly acquired sound spelling in a connected text. This connected text is in the form of a chapter book. So these chapter books have dynamic plots and storylines. But, you know, part of a strong core curriculum is, you know, making sure that we're scaffolding our instruction and supporting our students as needed during the lesson and also after the lesson. If, you know, we really want to keep kids out of intervention. But the second half of CKLA's K2 program is called the Knowledge Strand. And it's in the Knowledge Strand that we build rich background knowledge and vocabulary. This is what you're looking at here is CKLA's knowledge sequence. As you look at this, you'll see that many of these topics are introducing to students to topics revolving around science, social studies, literature, art, culture, right? This sequence was intentionally designed to build rich worldly knowledge and vocabulary, not just within grade levels, but across grade levels. As students progress through CKLA, we deepen their vocabulary and background knowledge around these topics because we know that knowledge is going to stick. It's like Velcro, like Natalie Wexler says, it's going to stick to prior knowledge. This also creates equity, right? Instead of activating prior knowledge, we're providing it through this intentional sequence. You'll also notice that we have 9 to 12 different domains of knowledge per year or per grade level. And the purpose of that is that we get to have the opportunity to really expose students to a wide range of worldly topics and not just limit those. You know, if you think you have 180 days with your students, every 2 to 3 weeks, you get to expose them to a rich worldly topic that they probably otherwise aren't hearing about at home. And that is truly something that is so rewarding as a teacher. So how do we do this in an age-appropriate manner, though? Well, in our knowledge strand in kindergarten through 2nd grade, the teacher actually reads a daily interactive read aloud to develop that background knowledge. Students are engaging in text-based discussions, and then they're also going to reinforce their newly learned content knowledge through application activities. So every day the teacher is going to build off of the stories that were previously read within that, you know, around that topic. As the teacher, you're having this, or you're using this interactive read aloud to read a complex text that's 2 to 3 grade levels above what students can actually decode at that point. You're modeling that proficient reading. You have the opportunity to expose them to the formal language that authors use and also lay the foundation for close reading here. And then after each read aloud, students get to reinforce their newly learned knowledge and develop their ELA skills through an application piece. But CKLA, just like I said, it's the only program that's built off of the science of reading. It changes its structure as students move into 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We actually integrate both strands. Students will have been explicitly taught, you know, the code. They will have the instruction to become skilled decoders. They'll have the oral language to really make meaning of text. And so we build on this in 3rd through 5th grade by integrating that rich content and developing rigorous or, you know, those ELA skills in that. So 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, students are reading in these content-rich chapter books that are really engaging and really spark their curiosity. They're participating in close reading lessons, continuing to have those collaborative conversations. In CKLA, in our integrated strand, we have multiple opportunities for genre-focused writing where students are writing about the rich content that they're reading about. We also develop morphology and grammar skills through this really rich worldly content. So, you know, it takes to really implement a program that is based off of the science of reading. You know, it is a shift. And so today we're going to hear from our guests from Liverpool, and they're going to share their personal experience. But before we do that, I'm curious to find out, you know, is your school or district interested in making this shift to implement core curriculum that aligns with the science of reading? Everybody's coming from different places, right? Maybe you're a balanced literacy district. Maybe you always use Basil's. Maybe you are kind of just pulling things together. But as this science of reading movement sweeps across our nation and educators become more aware, are you seeing maybe a shift in your district? I'll give you guys a second to share your response. I'm curious to find out where we all stand. Wow, 80% of you guys said that your districts are interested in making this shift to using core curriculum that's aligns with the science of reading. And for those of you who are joining us here and are trying, really interested in learning more about the science of reading, and you feel like not everybody's there yet, continue to be a thought leader and share this current research and the solutions to that. So I shared with you guys that we're going to hear from a district, Liverpool Central School District in New York, and their personal journey that they took, to make the shift from balanced literacy to CKLA. So in a second, you'll get to meet Allison Fluent, Hope Everts, Jennifer Cattell, Emily Morpheus, Aziza Darwish, and Katie Hildreth. I had the opportunity to work with these educators back in the fall, and so their story is truly inspiring. I'm so excited to share it with you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Let's see. And let me go ahead. So I see you guys. So Allison and Hope are actually literacy coaches for Liverpool's. There they are. Now I can see you guys. Allison and Hope are in the back. Hope is on the left. Allison's on the right. They're Liverpool's phenomenal K-8 literacy coaches. And in the front, we have our guest joining. Allison and Hope, do you guys want to go ahead and introduce our teachers? It's so good to see you all again. I've gone in and worked with them for initial implementation and then went back and got to hear the power of CKLA that they were witnessing in their classroom. But more importantly, through this work with Liverpool and also through my own experiences and being able to relate to you guys, I know that there are struggles and challenges that come along with this, and I'm excited to share those with our guests as well. So Allison and Hope, if you want to introduce your teachers, I'll give you an opportunity to do that.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Again, I'm Allison Fluent, and sitting in front of us is Jen Cattell, Emily Morpheus, Kate Hildreth, and Aziza Darwish, all part of our 3rd grade team from Nate Perry Elementary.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. And then Hope is on the left of Allison. And it seemed to me, Allison, you really worked a lot with K2, specifically with your CKLA implementation, and Hope, you really worked with 3-5. Am I right in saying that?
You are. Yes.
So you guys both have different experiences and different things to share, and I'm excited to ask you about that, to hear from you guys today. So when I first met Allison, Allison shared with me her own personal experience about learning about the science of reading, and then how they had come to CKLA. So as a district, Allison, Allison and Hope, I want you to share with me and our guests about how Liverpool actually came to even learn about the science of reading, because this is truly powerful.
Sure. Okay. So basically back in 2018, our district started to learn a little bit about the science of reading through a local group around here called the Reading League. And so we worked with them a little bit to start to implement that knowledge to our teachers in that summer. And then throughout that time period, Allison can speak more personally because she was in the audience at that point in time. Since then, we've continued that role. Allison and I had the liberty of going to letters training with our reading teachers. There's about 20 reading teachers in our district. And then we went on to learn, become facilitators of that training. And so we've continued that process of learning and teaching, facilitating our teachers' learning of the science of reading. So Liverpool has really been spearheading and investing more so in our teachers' knowledge. And so that's how we started our journey.
Good. Allison, is there anything you want to add to that? I know that you guys shared with me, you guys had your kindergarten through sixth grade teachers trained by the Reading League in the science of reading. And one thing that you shared I want you to share with everyone their reaction to that after that initial training.
Sure, I can share how that felt for me personally.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough and honored to be in this role as instructional coach currently, but I was for a short period of time several years ago. Got a chance to return to the classroom and put into practice some of the things that I had been talking about as an instructional coach and pick up a new grade level under my belt. And then was lucky enough to be a part of this team again with Hope. So as somebody in the audience in summer of 2018, the message from the Reading League and the wonderful work that they did that summer with our teachers and the message they brought was something different than I had ever experienced as a classroom teacher or instructional coach before. It all made sense to me. I could tell we were shifting. I looked around the room knowing some of the faces around me and kind of knew there were some other people with me on something's happening. Something big is happening right now. And after that training, heard that our current practices and resources really weren't aligned, and what I had been feeling at times in the classroom as a teacher now made sense to me. That I could picture some of these kids' faces and thinking about what I had tried with them in the past and how I had tried to use the resources to meet their needs. Went back to my team and we all had a little moment in the hall and rallied ourselves back up to get through the year, and away we went, doing the best we could to apply this new knowledge without so much of the deeper understanding of the practicality, what that might look like in practice.
Absolutely. So to any teachers want to share, do you remember that experience walking away from that training and feeling like, holy moly, what I've been doing is maybe, like you said, not aligned to this, and that's all I've done for years, and what that feeling felt like? Because I think that's a very common feeling. So if any of you want to share that with us, I'm sure our guests would love to hear about that experience as well.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. Something new and can be scary, and something so different from what you're used to can be even more scary. So you're looking for something different because you're kind of used to hearing, well, best practices and what you think are best practices might not necessarily be best practices to somebody else. So kind of coming away from that training, knowing that your fellow teachers are also doing the same training, you have something to talk about. Were they feeling the same way? This is different than what we're used to. How are we going to change our best practices together so that it's consistent? I think that was kind of the general consensus of, leaving away with something different. And yes, it's scary, but it's definitely a needed change.
I love that. So, Hope, do you mind sharing what led you guys to even asking your teachers to be trained in the science of reading? Like, how did you guys even arrive at that moment?
So when Allison was back as a coach prior, she spearheaded with another executive the review process of the current curriculum that we were using. And what they have found in their team effort with teachers on board is that it was not aligned. And so that was one piece of it. And then the second piece, I believe, was that our students weren't making the progress that we envisioned and would have hoped for our students. So it was a stagnant cell. It was really just not making any improvements. So those were two main things that
Pretty much in line with the NAEP data.
Yeah, absolutely.
Across the country.
Yeah, and so even at the beginning of this, I shared, like districts are looking at their data, and we understand or we feel the time and energy that is put into teachers like spinning their wheels, right? Trying to make changes, doing the same thing though. And so it's that moment that you're like, okay, our data is showing us that we need to make a shift, right? But like you guys said, you go and you learn about this research, right? And it's like still iffy, like it's still like, okay, this requires me to do things differently than I've always done. And so that can be scary. So Allison, before I ask you guys the next question, I want you to, I think I love this story about, how you came to know CKLA, but more so about your initial introduction to CKLA with having your kids going through a school implementing CKLA.
Sure. Prior to the Science of Reading training here in Liverpool in 2018, my own children are in a district where they use CKLA. And you know, my oldest, based on his birthday, he got 2 years of pre-K. We sent him off to kindergarten cheering, like, you're set, you're on your way. Didn't really pay as close attention to maybe what was happening instructionally because we knew he was super prepared. I have twins that entered kindergarten shortly after, and based on entered pre-K actually shortly after, and based on their birth date, sending them just a little earlier, I paid a little bit closer attention. And now 2 of my children's futures were at stake. And I was waiting for that traditional calendar of the letter of the day or the letter of the week for pre-K coming home, was prepared to totally bring in something that starts with the letter B, and waited and didn't get anything. So I followed up with some questions, and I believe that the teachers at the time answered the best they could. But I do know that after, maybe a year or 2 after, they also got the Science of Reading training. And I now know that those answers would be different now if I asked again. But as a teacher, or as a parent teacher, I was looking for what I thought would traditionally happen in pre-K and that my oldest had experienced outside of the universal setting. Just 1 year later, I went through the Science of Reading training and started to understand now what was happening in pre-K and what they were experiencing in the fall of their kindergarten year. Still a little apprehensive, still with my fingers crossed that somewhere around December, January, we would start talking about letter names. And lo and behold, that just happened naturally. And their excitement for what they were learning happened naturally. And what a great feeling that is as a parent.
Absolutely. I love that. I just got chills. I love that story. So you guys go to the Science of Reading training. Allison's like, okay, wait, my kids are using CKLA. So you guys come to learn about CKLA. And so before we dive into that though, you identified the need to make a shift. Were you guys like at that moment, like, okay, we're going to adopt a new curriculum? Was that a determining factor? And what did that process, or how did you guys even prepare for that?
Sure. So I think leaving that 2018 summer and continuing that training of the science, I think the logical next question was that every teacher was asking us, okay, great, now that we know this, what do we have as a resource to now go ahead and implement that? And so began our process of piloting. And I think Allison's going to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. We had a larger committee here in Liverpool, and in that group that was focused on humanities, we had a subcommittee formed. And that subcommittee's charge was to investigate whether there were any resources out there that supported what we had just learned about the science of reading, and kept hearing from the Reading League here in Syracuse, and continued with our PD and what was out there. So we surveyed our teachers first and said, now that you know what you know, and our past experience tells us, taught us important lessons. What do you want in your next resource for ELA instruction? And so we surveyed our teachers first. From there, we used our survey results to create a rubric of what we would want from the next resource for ELA, and we had 2 that were non-negotiable. It had to match Scarborough's reading route, and we had to have alignment to New York's Next Generation Learning Standards for ELA. From there, we also scoured ed reports that helped us, and from there we found that there were really only 2 that could come to the table. CKLA was one of them, and we were lucky enough to arrange them here at our district office where they presented, and we had 2 groups of teachers, reading teachers were represented, and administrators that were using the rubric to score in both presentations where those programs seemed to align with what our teachers wanted next.
If I can,
yes,
I think the best part about what came of that is that our teachers were so armed with the knowledge that they were putting these questions to these presenters, and sometimes the presenters couldn't really answer it, and our teachers knew those answers. And when they were looking into materials, our teachers were looking quickly to be able to know, they knew what they were looking for. And so they felt prepared for these presentations to, like, you better hit this mark, because if you don't, then you're not going to come to the table in the future.
So one thing that is just so inspiring about y'all's story, y'all's adoption process, is that you guys really started with informing your teachers. So that, like you said, Hope, when it came down to the adoption process, you had your non-negotiables in your survey responses, you had that general consensus, and then during presentations, though, they were able to truly make an informed decision. It's like the know better, do better. They were at a spot that they really could choose to do better. And I think that's powerful. So Allison, I want you to share, you shared with me the story about, like, you're looking at CKLA's materials and y'all feel almost like defeated, like what program is going to put the science of reading into action? And you're looking through what were you looking through, our program guide, or?
This is when I was back in the classroom trying to figure out what that science of reading stuff I just learned meant.
Yeah.
I found the first edition on Engage and Why, and I read the first 10 pages of the program guide, and I literally walked out in the hall with it in my hands and looked for someone to tell. Does anyone know this matches what we just learned? So, I did the best I could to try it out for myself, but was lucky enough to return to the coaching role. And so I got to make a bigger impact, I think, here with that. But felt that understanding in the beginning of the program guide, the part us teachers love to skip over, right? Like, tell me what I'm going to do. I'm so glad I took the time to read that and understand that. And since then, our pilot teachers have done the same in some of our training.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you guys choose to pilot CKLA only because the other program you were reviewing didn't really align with the science of reading. So you have a large group of teachers though, right? And you have these pilot teachers. I know that, tell me how you even developed, like, how did pilot teachers sign up for this? Were they, like, was that something that everyone was interested in? Was there hesitation to even pilot a program that looks so different? I want you to be real with our guests about the hesitations you experienced or heard about from your teachers.
Sure. So we are a 9-building elementary, K-6 actually, but we know that CKLA is K-5. And so again, we went to our teachers and asked who actually wants to pilot. We started there to get our early adopters in, right? And so once we had that,
and we asked them to volunteer as a team. As
a team, correct. Yes, you had to do it as a team. And I think that there were some teams that needed a little convincing from one of their members, right? That was like, I need you to do this with me. And so they did it together. Once we had that, there was a workshop day of names and buildings and, Post-it notes on a board, because basically what we were making sure that we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure every grade was represented across the district. And we also wanted to make sure every building was represented, because if we're going to have these conversations, we wanted it, or if our teachers were going to be having these conversations, we wanted it to be happening in every building, right? We didn't want anyone to not have those questions be answered or worries to be met by us. So that's how we did it. And then we reached out to those teams that we decided on, and we explained our legwork that we did to decide it. We had some teachers begging us, please, we didn't get on the pilot team, can we please do it? But we decided that we needed to stick because we would be managing all those teams with what we did. So that's kind of how we decided on pilot teams.
And we're looking at 4 lovely ladies in the front of you guys who all chose to obviously pilot CKLA, the courage it took to do that. Does anyone want to share, was there anyone in front of or here with us that was initially hesitant? Or did you guys all just kind of jump at the opportunity to pilot something because you were ready for something different? And feel free to be honest, or maybe someone who piloted who really was hesitant, but then came around after implementing. Feel free to share any of those stories.
I can. So the 4 of us, we were very willing. So as far as hesitant, we can't give you that. But what I can say, about us being very willing is I also looked at and used the first edition off of Engage NY last school year. We were really just, putting some different pieces together to really try to build up our ELA program. So I remember last year when I used the first edition and just kind of played around with it with my students, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this material is going to be way over their heads. And shame on me because I was completely wrong. The way that it was laid out, the students loved it, and it was working, and they wanted more. So when the opportunity to pilot CKLA came about, I was crossing my fingers and hoping, and we all were, and it was just such great news to be able to be a part of something like this. So yeah, there wasn't any hesitation.
Good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do any of you have any experiences to share with maybe some pilot teachers who took a little bit of convincing? They're piloting, or they're going to pilot CKLA, but they were still resistant, even initially. I know someone just asked in the chat box if there were any kindergarten teachers, and the reason I'm bringing that up is, Allison, you would send me emails with so many questions about CKLA's kindergarten curriculum and what teachers were asking about. So I'd love for you to speak to that portion or that experience with kindergarten.
Absolutely, and I think if our kindergarten pilot teachers were here, they would be laughing at me sharing the story. But they were the only grade level in our first survey that no one raised their hand for. Mm-hmm. And we were doing some standards unpacking and prioritizing last winter and spring, and so had regular meetings with these grade levels. And there was one meeting where during lunch I brought the stadium box of the CKLA kindergarten materials in, just to kind of set the stage and let them start going through it. And I remember one teacher, it makes me smile, we were talking about it, and I said, I would probably do it myself because I wouldn't want anyone else to decide for me. I would want to know why we're saying yes to this or why we're saying no to this. And she told me the next fall, the only reason we did this is because you said that to me. You challenged me, and I accepted the challenge, and had a similar conversation with another team as well. Be the first to get your hands on it and decide.
And thank you for sharing that. So I'll just kind of sum this up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but you guys, to praise you for the work you put in before your initial implementation, that PD session that I had the privilege of leading. It was so much fun. You guys did some pre-work. You prepped your teachers. We had our initial implementation training. Kind of built even more capacity and knowledge around the science of reading and how CKLA puts that in action and what that would look like day to day. And then you guys also had a post-work day to really learn how to plan for CKLA instruction, right? And so kudos to you guys for really supporting your teachers in that process as they made this shift, especially as pilot teachers. But, one thing that we haven't talked about yet is just what that implementation and the changes that you guys saw as teachers. I want to hear from teachers, from you all, what you noticed about how CKLA was changing you as a teacher, and then also the effects and the changes you saw within your students that ultimately led to you guys choosing to purchase and fully adopt CKLA across your district for next school year. So if anyone wants to share about how you saw yourself changing as a reading teacher, and then some of the things you'd like to share about your students, I'd love to hear from you.
I feel like this is a perfect question for me. I am the special ed teacher on this team. And so I'm typically super open-minded, and I definitely feel some hesitation from other special ed teachers in the district, kind of like, how is it working for your kids and what does it look like? And, is it accessible for them? And I've had experience working in different states, and I've never had a program that is accessible for all of my kids. which is like huge. It makes just like my heart explode because it's so exciting. And like it sticks with my kids. So I have kids, you know, on the spectrum. I have kids who struggle with language processing. I have kids who have speech impairments, you name it, and they sit and they're super engaged and it sticks with them. Like they remember units we did like months ago and bring it back up, and it's in their writing and they're using vocabulary, words that I've never even heard before, but then they're using later. So something that's super exciting is the equity piece for me and the accessibility. Initially it was kind of scary to introduce like such high level text, but they get it. Like just stick with it and know that they can do it. So
I love that. You literally, my heart is smiling from ear to ear. You just gave me chills because I hear that all the time. And also what you shared, Jen, is that, you know, like teachers look at the topics, the domain topics, and they're like, no way my kids will A, be interested in this, or B, like be able to even learn about these topics. And you know, sometimes it's because we don't know about it or feel comfortable about teaching it. And I think we could probably all agree with that. But the common, feedback from that is truly, like you said, as you jump in, you see the curiosity it sparks in your students and their engagement. And then the way that all students can access text and the way that CKLA makes that instructional piece easy for teachers to provide those opportunities for students to do that. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you want to share anybody else about your experience with that?
I can say that I have never felt better prepared as a teacher with any other program. It's everything is so nicely included and
We
laid
don't make
out.
trips to the copy room anymore.
Yeah. And
It's ready.
right? We're not pulling from different places to put a lesson together, and it's just all, and it works so nicely, and everything just makes sense. Something that we do in one lesson seamlessly follows into the next and into the next, and I can see the difference in myself as a teacher because I feel prepared. I'm excited about it, and I can see the difference in my students because they are feeling successful. And it's amazing to see their writing. It's wonderful. They're excited about what we're reading. It's a big change in my classroom.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, I feel more confident as a teacher.
Yeah.
Even things when it comes to our formal observations, it's never more like, oh my gosh, like I have to scramble, make sure I have this piece and this piece. It's like, no, like this is what we do. It's awesome. She could go, our principal can go into any one of our classrooms. We're doing the same thing at the same time. So I'm confident that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. It's working for me as a teacher. I feel prepared. I have what I need, and it's working for our students because they're engaged and they love it. I mean, we just today we're doing the Vikings right now, and they're playing Viking games at recess. Like they're saying, I'll be this character, I'll be this character. Like, did you just hear that? They're playing Vikings at recess. It's just so we're like more prepared and confident as teachers. And I think the engagement level and the excitement around reading as a whole is incredible. Again, for topics that you look at initially and you're like, I mean, even just opening ancient Rome, before, like, guys, this first lesson, there's no way they're gonna know where Rome is on a map, and by that first lesson, like, oh yes, the Tiber River goes through here, and the Mediterranean Sea. It's wild. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's truly impressive. As Isa, is that how you say your name? Okay. Do you want to share anything about your experience and speak to maybe what's been the biggest change for you that you've noticed in your students?
Well, I think just the writing overall. Like, this is my third year of teaching. The past 2 years I taught fourth grade, and just the way CKLA is so scaffolded with the writing. Like, we spent just one lesson at a topic sentence, and afterwards we all talked and we were like, I feel like that should have been longer. But our students got it, and then as we've been going on with the units, it's been less and less of us modeling and them just taking control over it. And like Hope came in the beginning of the year to see a lesson, and she was a writing lesson, and I was like, I want a lot of feedback, and she was just blown away with how much they could do themselves already. And we talk about it every day. Just their writing is, I feel for my kids in the past I didn't have this because they're just naturally restating. When it asks for 2 details, they say, can we have more details? Can we put more in there? And they know to go back to their readers to find information. And for me, that's just like so eye-opening, because I've never really felt confident teaching writing, but the way CKLA is so scaffolded, it puts an ease at the teacher, like it's easy.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, when I went into Aziz's classroom, it was amazing, first of all. But to actually, not only the writing, but how the students are speaking in class, incomplete sentences, and how they're responding and how they're interacting with each other and communicating with their discourse. At 3rd grade, I was just blown away. I was blown away. So that is another piece that is amazing with CKLA.
Yeah, and you know what, Hope, you're exactly right. I know my own, before I share my personal experience with that speaking and the sophisticated conversations and students really excited to share with one another what they've just learned in that rich read aloud. But I'd love, Allison, you know, you work closely a lot with your K2 teachers. Did you notice a difference in their speaking as well?
Well, I wasn't going to speak up again, but I did similar visits in K1 and 2 classrooms, and you can see how that's already beginning in the way they're responding to text, the turn-in talks, and with the teacher in complete sentences. So I can see what they're going to get next year and how amazingly that's going to take off because they've been well prepared.
Absolutely. Okay. I have about 3 more questions. I want to wrap these up so we can get to any questions that we have from our participants. First question is, if you as a teacher had to share, or you were having a conversation with someone who's another teacher from another district or school who's come to learn about the science of reading, but really everyone else isn't on board, what would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I think one of like a personal thing is being able to immerse yourself in the classroom and see what it looks like from a teacher who has been teaching it. So I know that we are all very open to have teachers come into our classroom to see exactly what it looks like. I think it's a lot easier to see it in action rather than reading it from a manual sometimes, because that can be the scary part, right? If it's a lot of reading to do, you know, you're crunched on time as it is. So I think one of the biggest things that even our principals trying to facilitate in our own building is to have the peer collaboration. So grades coming in to see as the pilot team what we're doing and what that looks like. I know even in your training, when you showed us videos of the teacher actually teaching a lesson, that kind of really put pieces together for me. So definitely being able to see an actual lesson played out, because it's one thing on paper, but to see it, the way that the teacher uses different strategies to do vocabulary or ask the comprehension questions, I think is really meaningful.
I love that. Yay. I always encourage people. I'm like, if you have questions about CKLA, like I can show you this in a presentation, but just go see it live. If you have the opportunity to see it live, it speaks for itself. The power speaks for itself. But Hope and Allison, what about you as administrators? You know, if you're working with a district who really is coming, you know, stuck on balanced literacy or hesitant, or, you know, they see the need for change, or what words of advice do you give to them?
We've definitely encountered that, even in some of our meetings with people outside of our district, teachers outside of our district, different trainings. I think for us, it's meeting people where they're at with the information and acknowledging where they are in that journey of understanding. When I think back to who I was as a questioning parent, not understanding my child's pre-K program, to who I am now, I share that vulnerability because I feel that that's what it takes to embrace what might be the greatest change of their career.
Yeah.
I also think, if you look at, we talked about this today actually, for our kindergartners, and when we trained the teachers, and when you came in, Megan, it was like, go slow in the beginning to go fast later. To take that same exact approach with those teachers and those administrators. Go slow in the beginning, you know, give them some articles or give them some background, give them some pinpoint ideas and topics to look at to kind of build their own knowledge to then forge them forward even further.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys had a beautiful adoption process, which is coming to learn about the science of reading from the Reading League, seeing the need for a change in your curriculum based off of what you had just learned. And then the way that your adoption process went, you're feedback from teachers with responding to surveys, the work you did to unpack your standards, all of that work, and then just the pre and post work from that PD training. You know, like, you have had a very successful implementation. I love your commitment to putting the science of reading into action. And I know that participants don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions right now. In fact, you know what? Before we do that, what I'm going to do is let me do this. I'm going to share my screen. So just as a reminder to our participants, if you do want to learn more, we do have our Facebook group where educators who are interested in coming to learn about the science of reading are sharing different, trending resources, sharing their thoughts, sharing their experiences within their classrooms and districts. Please feel free to join that. Also, we have our Science of Reading, the podcast, where our very own Susan Lambert gets to interview and participate in conversations with leading literacy experts. And so just building, knowledge around the science of reading. Also, we're going to continue this conversation with our next webinar, which is actually tomorrow. It's, going to identify the science of reading using MClass, which is our assessment, and Amplify Reading, which is our adaptive, fun, engaging, supplemental digital literacy program. But like I said, right now, nobody wants to hear from me. You guys have seen questions pop up in our chat, but I'm going to give our participants, the opportunity to ask away. So, Madigan, have you had any questions come in?
Yeah, hi, we did get some questions in from the participants. One of them is, do you believe the science of reading, professional development, and learning must come first before the program is implemented?
Yeah. Yes, I do think that is an important foundation for teacher understanding. We mentioned that we were part of a group that went to letters training, which was another layer of adding on our science of reading knowledge. And one half of the room had CKLA first edition for years. One half of the room were our teachers, our reading teachers, and Hope and I. And throughout this training, we continued to hear people mention, oh, that's why CKLA does that. Oh, now I understand what CKLA is doing here. So, I think there's no time that's the wrong time, but I do think that we were set up well by giving our teachers the knowledge first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes your implementation go a lot smoother. My experience was the opposite. I came to know CKLA in 2016. Yes. And I was implementing it and didn't know, everything I was doing with my co-teacher who had been teaching for 30 years in first grade, everything was just making sense to us, but we didn't know why. And so it was kind of the opposite for me, in that I started to learn about the science of reading after putting it into action, not even really knowing what I was doing. But the science of reading is not old news. It's just, that research has been around for decades. And so it's amazing that we're part of this opportunity to bring it to surface and dive in. So that was a great response, I think, though. Anything else, Madigan?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more since we are going over time now. Somebody asked, how accessible is CKLA for English learners?
So I have students through ENL, and it is very accessible. They made connections with their home countries. When we were doing ancient Rome, a lot of them talked about the temples that they have or that their parents have gone to. And the first grade team at our school uses the first edition, and they have my students made connections from when they had it last year and 2 years ago, from the civilizations that they learned about. But it's very accessible. My ENL students are writing so much, and me and the ENL teacher, when we talk about it afterwards, she's like, she is also floored with how much they're writing and the vocabulary they're using and like the connections that they're making. It is extremely accessible, I think, to all students.
Yeah, and I love that. And in our sidebar supports, having those EL supports that are aligned to WEA's framework, like we really make that easy for, or CKLA makes that easy for teachers. I'm going to ask this one. I see this one question in the chat, and don't you think eyes on print reading is an important experience? And so just to clarify, in our foundational skills K2 piece, students do have, they have text in hand to apply the foundational skills that they've been explicitly taught. In the knowledge strand in K2, we remove that energy that's required to actually decode words by that oral read aloud, because remember that those texts are 2 to 3 grade levels above what students could decode, and the purpose of the knowledge strand is really to build oral language. But in regards to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, obviously students, you can all speak to this, students definitely have their text in hand and are really reading about that rich content. And so we do have, text in hand within CKLA. And if you do have more questions, please about that, and you'd like more resources, please follow up. But Madigan, do we have any other questions? By the way, y'all, I see somebody from Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, which is like right down the road from me. I have to give a shout out because I'm like 20 minutes away. Happy that you're joining us, Cheryl. So anybody else? Or any other questions, Madigan?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of questions actually about the recordings for this webinar. This webinar will be recorded and sent to all registrants afterwards, as well as if you want the recordings for any past webinars that have happened, you can go to the same website that you signed up for this one on, which is amplify.com/SOR-webinars. And you can complete the form, and then you will be emailed the recordings of the ones that you checked afterwards. One more question that we got in terms of content is, there are a lot. Are decodable texts used within the early grades for CKLA?
Yes.
Our newest CKLA experts, can you answer that?
Yes, they are. And when they land in kindergarten, they land and they get running with it. So that to go slow in the beginning, to go fast later, I've definitely seen that happening, and our teachers have spoken about that. But the best part is that it's cumulative, and so that they're not experiencing text they haven't learned the code for. And I know the frustrations I've felt as a 1st and 2nd grade teacher, having text in front of them that they hadn't been exposed to yet. And this really truly is decodable, and I love the experience they get with the teacher, depending on the lesson, the teacher bringing it to them and then revisiting it the next day, and finding evidence within as early as kindergarten is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we say decodable text, right? I used to think that meant like equaled boring, but these
I used to mean like a decodable text. But it's
so, I mean, would you agree that it's just so different, like with those chapter books?
And it's not boring when they light up because they're reading.
Yeah. Success, self-efficacy, the goal, right? Truly building successful readers. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining. We have gone under time. Madigan, is there anything that we will, if questions haven't been answered, are we going to reach out and respond to those?
Yeah, if you want to send me an email at mnaylor, N as in November, AYLOR @amplify.com, we can go ahead and answer any questions that we were not able to today.
Great. Well, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this fabulous conversation, hearing from Liverpool's wonderful educators who joined us today and their experience with putting the science of reading into action through implementing Amplify's core literacy curriculum, CKLA. Like Madigan said, if you have follow-up questions or want to know more, please don't hesitate to reach out. And ladies, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know that so many people are so thankful for your vulnerability and sharing, and also, just being part of this. So thank you again. I hope everyone has a great evening. And if you want to know more about assessment, be sure to join in on tomorrow's webinar. So thanks, guys.